Welcome to Born to Serve. I'm Charles McFall, and I am here with Dan Russell today. And on the We Serve Network, we talk to everybody who serves humanity, who touches their fellow human being in a positive way. And Dan has done so much in his career that you may have never heard about. This little tiny artist like Bono, Dan helped out. But Dan is one of these guys who has influenced so much of the things that we love in life, especially in music. And I'm so excited to talk to you about all these different aspects today, Dan. So thank you for coming in and talking with me this afternoon.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Good to meet you.
Yeah. And it's good to meet you. You definitely have. I mean, if I saw you in the street like that, that's a musician through and through. You got the whole vibe and the look and everything. I love it.
I want to pull back the curtain. I'm a hack. I get lucky. I'm not a noodler. I'm not a polished musician. If I write a 4-minute song, and I go into a studio with it, I'm not going to be sitting in the studio for more than 2 hours and watch you take the oxygen away. I just want to. I want to convey the passion. I want to create a
Gotcha.
resonance so that resonating with you that invites you in, and that's how I am. I surround myself though with. I'm the weakest link on my chain. So if I go into the studio, I have great people that can, through nuance,
Sure. Yeah.
convey what I'm trying to convey with the song.
So I've been a paramedic for 30 years and a digital creator for 20. And what I hear is you're the heart. The heart, man, it pumps, it does. But you got hands that do things, and you got eyes that see things, and ear, and you got the brain that processes it. You you are essential to the magic that happens. You like I said, you might not be the noodler, you might not be the Adele blasting out the vocals, but without you in the project you were in, it's a different kind of magic. It's a different direction it goes in. And I believe you bring magic to what you do.
Yeah, that word translates magic. My bottom line is if you are the artist that calls me up and says, "Hey, I need you out here," I'm here to serve you. And what do
Mm.
you need me to do? Do you need me to get a cup of coffee? Do you need me to
Yeah, right.
convey something that's not getting conveyed through your normal channels? Whatever, I'm here to serve. And I had a rule of thumb when I was a lot younger. I said, look, I want to work only with artists that if they didn't pay me, the compensation was to serve
Yeah,
them. And it's one thing after another. And that's, you mentioned Bono earlier, or the band U2, because I
sure.
knew
Yeah,
I met them all in like 1980, 81, that time frame, and they're about 5 years younger than me, but and we just got along. I loved their passion. I loved the fact that they did not make Christ an adjective and say we are going to only play churches. They said we want to go into the world and share the
yeah,
gospel, and to all creatures, you know. And
yeah.
we want to make great music. We want to make music that will resonate beyond our time. And
That's the second time you used the word resonate. And I use it a lot as well. But when you talk about resonance, you work with a lot of different people of all levels. What is it that, as best you can put into words, what is when you know, hey, we're resonating, we're clicking, what is that moment for you?
when I'm at a threshold of deciding whether I want to work with them, when I listen to the music, and I'll stand back in the back of the room and watch a performance. I'll listen to people carefully that are experiencing it, and as I mentioned before, when we went live, I spent most of my time in the between the ages of 20 and 60, doing just mainstream, going out. I did one tour with a band called The Call. I think we did 305 shows before the tour was done. So that was
Mm,
about 18 months before I went home and living on a bus or whatever it was, the
yeah.
transportation. But there was never a night uh, that I would be in the back of the room and go, man, I wish God showed up. How can I trigger the omnipresent God to be omnipresent?
Right.
You know, and I never felt that. Although I have felt the opposite when I do working on an event that's just for the Christians. I have felt the opposite of, I wish this was more authentic. I wish this venue was different. I
Yeah.
love the scripture where Jesus talks about bringing all the children forward, bringing them all in, bring them all in. We should never create an event where we say, "You people, you need to stay out." You know,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
so that's how I always sort of operated.
no, I love it. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church,
Yeah.
and my dad was a preacher. He's retired now, and it was so different at home than it was at church. As in, when you're in a system, and for us it was the Southern Baptist, he had to abide by their guidelines, and he chose for whatever reason. I've never actually talked to him about why, but he chose to choose that system. But at home, he, like you're saying, he never put Christ as an adverb. He lived a life. He was real with me. He was real with the family. He was as real as he could be allowed to be in some of the churches he was in. But one of the biggest things was secular versus Christian music. And he got fired from a church because he was a youth pastor at the time. Dan, you'll love this. He was giving away tape cassettes. This is like the 80s of Petra, right? The Christian rock band Petra, and that was too much for some of the deacons of the church, and so he got booted for bringing in devil's music. And for those of people who don't know, Petra was a huge. Well, I'd call them hair metal at the time I listened to, but basically a hair metal rock band. But they were all Christian,
Yeah.
100% Christian, and
Yeah.
being rejected by the church. It's crazy.
Well, and fear is a big governor of a lot of people. I mean, why did I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior the first 50 times? Is because as an 8-year old, when the
Sure.
pastor gets up and says, you know, you're going to hell unless you, all right, I don't understand hell, but this sounds like a better deal. And finally, um, the pastor would catch me afterwards and said, "Look, you don't have to keep walking down the aisle." And I said, "Well, I feel like I should. Why do I feel compelled to do that? I mean, when Billy Graham gave the invitation, and that just as I am, and that organ
Mhm.
on, I remember in 1962 at the Boston Garden, I was in the second balcony and in the second row actually, and I got out the aisle and walked down and I held on to the bar and looked down there, and it looked like the Grand Canyon for me at that age,
Mhm.
and I started to cry. And my dad came up and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Dad, I'm not going to make it down there in time. I'm just a little guy. I'm going to get lost. I'm going to hell." And
Mm.
just then, Billy Graham said, "For all you listening at home or in your car on radio, you can ask Jesus into your life right where you are." And my dad tells me that I just wiped my tears. I
Mm.
patted his chest and I said, "Dad, we can go back to our seats. I'm saved."
uh,
The
um,
fear factor, you know?
it is, and there's such a powerful energy to music, and when you put it together with the powerful words, and it can be a manipulation. And from what I'm gathering, when you're saying Jesus is an adverb, you seem to have spent your career avoiding the manipulation that can come through music and used it for empowerment instead.
Yeah, I meant adjective. I'm a Christian
Sorry,
plumber.
I said the wrong thing. You said adjective.
Yeah,
Yeah, my bad.
you know, I, and and it just allows the listener to go, "Oh, I'm going to work with this mechanic because he's a Christian mechanic. He's going to be more honest." You know,
Mm.
and those people that aren't Christians don't have Christ as someone to morally guide them not to screw me. you
Yeah.
know, I found out in the mainstream world, there are more believers than some Christians would like to think. Like, don't tell me people that listen to Petra, God can use that, you know.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing about the mainstream is that God is working with or without your permission. He's not waiting for you to look at him and give him a thumbs up. God loves us all unconditionally. It's Love is the transformative power. Not
What is some of the stories that I'm sorry to cut you off. You got me excited. Coming through your long and awesome career, what are some of those moments that you've seen where church would be like, oh, leave them alone, but you saw God working through somebody who might not be a believer?
uh, the countless. I early days of U2, uh, seeing asking the guys, where do you want to be in 10 years? Are you going to be bigger than Billy Graham or bigger than the Beatles? And then a couple of guys would roll their eyes and say, oh, you should never ask that question to a lead singer. And a few minutes later, he came back and said, both bigger, and they want to get a stadium full of people, whether they know it or not, uh, praising God, worshiping God. They don't have to use any cliches. They just have to sing their passion. Oftentimes, before we have a show, whatever these are, whoever these artists are, there's a prayer, and the prayer is, God, you know, we've worked our butts off. We have the best crew. We got, you know, so please just use us. And we're going to go out and on the downbeat, we're going to come in and we're going to give it 3 hours. And it's you're the person that in charge of the harvest, not us. We don't qualify ourselves as good or bad based on how many hands are raised. We don't look for the
Mm,
hands. Although at some of these shows, the hands are always up. And there's nothing cliche about it. It's you can't help it. You know,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So many times I would just pinch myself because I was so excited to be in the room, to be there, whether it's CBGB's in New York, or
Yeah.
it's the Purgatory in Atlanta,
Atlanta.
yeah,
Yeah.
or wherever it is. I'm just so confident in God's omnipresence, that I didn't have to hide in a venue that is used as a church. You know, it's something about seeing a show at the 40 Watt in Athens
Hmm.
that's passionate and full of great songs and full of joy. There's something about that goes beyond the four walls of a church building that is used only for these things that are approved. You know,
Yeah.
I just love the fact that God is not dependent on me and giving him a thumbs up. Okay, you okay, So it's I've seen a lot of it. And as far as the word career goes, you mentioned that earlier.
Hmm.
And someone will ask, what the career trajectory, what did you do, where did you study, blah blah blah,
Mm.
and you know there's a philosopher named Paul Tillich that has a book called The Eternal Now. And, I think if you are present in your moment with who you're with or what you're doing, and you're
Yeah.
touching on now, and the time space continuum has the future and the past. But
Hmm.
this is where we need to be present. This is a fading memory. This is a hope, a fear, whatever. But here, and one thing will lead to another. If you're faithful and you do an excellent job and you have gratitude in your spirit, and you say please and thank you, and you look at people in the eye and say, hey,
Hmm.
I remember you the last time we were here. How have you been? I mean, that's ministry. So
It
listen,
is. Yeah.
listen, you know, and I've just been blessed to, again, my rule of thumb was I'll work with you and you don't have to pay me because I'm getting paid just by being in the presence of this music, this experience. And I mean, if Bruce Coburn calls and says, I need you over here, I'm there. I don't know if you know Sam Phillips is, but she, in the Christian market, when she was a kid, she went by Leslie Phillips. And as she grew, she grew up.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I worked with her, I think, 4 records on Virgin and 3 on None Such. And shit, her bands were amazing. I went out with her one time. It was just her in a long red velvet dress, and behind her, a semicircle, a string section.
Mm.
And she get out. She's beautifully coy, and she's got a wit, and she just got up there and deliver one song after another, and look around the room and recognize all the souls, and the music was all nuance. It was just wonderful. I thought, like,
Mm.
oh, every time I was at a Sam Phillips show, and I was at many of them. We did a tour in 1986 or 87 where it's all by train. So we did almost 70 shows across the country by
Mm.
train. And unfortunately, the booking was not like let's do this city and then go to the next one and next.
It's not in order.
It was like Seattle, Minneapolis, Denver, Houston,
Yeah.
Nashville, you know. But that was what a wonderful experience to have.
Mm.
See America by train, all the train stations, but the music, the experience, the train, it all came together for like, I hope they don't find out who I really am because I'm like a stowaway on a magical tour, you know. But yeah, I've had some great experiences, but as they fade, sometimes someone recently called and said I was reading your Wikipedia page, and I said, oh boy. And I got on the Wikipedia page because I wanted to remember who they said I was. And I'm thinking like, "Ah, I don't really remember that one. Oh, I'm sorry. But it's about now. It's about today. It's about what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
and how can we serve one another and reflect light and love, and I think the way to do that is to start our mornings foundationally with a quiet time, and a quiet time means let God do the talking. Because usually we think about prayer and we come with our petitions, we throw a couple gratitudes in there, and then okay, all done, up and out. And I think it's like me sitting in your room and asking you 10 questions, and then as soon as we're done with those questions, I get up and walk out of the room.
No way.
You
Yeah.
know, that's kind of rude. And so I've learned that the scripture, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hears my voice, um, that knock is a great metaphor for experiences in our lives that were like, hey, I'm talking to you. Why aren't you listening to me? And sometimes those knocks are concussions. Sometimes they're a stroke. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's heart failure. And if you're fortunate enough to learn at a younger age, which I wasn't, when you get that knock, you should come. Next thing beyond the knock is speak, God. I'm here listening, and speak slowly because I'm not as smart as you. You use simple words, but thank you for your patience. But I need to learn to listen, and I'll avoid the next concussion if I am on the look at Jonah. he wa- he was listening and went the opposite way out of disobedience and fear, or he wasn't listening. Either way, I don't want to be in the Jonah world. You know, I want to head straight to Nineveh. And so, anyways,
So, what going from the kid at Billy Graham to where you started serving and mostly ended up being the musical world, what called you, what drove you to want to serve that way, what brought you in there?
it probably all. Well, I did do a stint for 3 weeks as a youth pastor at a church, and and I had prior to taking that job, I had made a an event with about 24 kids to do a canoe trip down the Connecticut River, and so I blocked that weekend off. And when the pastor said, "No, you work for me. You tell those kids no," and I looked at him. I said, "Well, I guess I quit," you know.
Hmm.
But I just found myself in situations and circumstances with very talented people by comparison to me, and they would, we would talk like you and I are talking, and they would say, I got this, that, and the other thing that I'm stuck at. Do you have any ideas? And I'd say, well, the first thing comes to mind is this, and then they'll say, okay, well, I need you with me. And I'll say, oh, all right. Well, I was very fortunate. I came out of college and went right to Harvard Square and lived in a rent control apartment that was a 3 bedroom for $111 a month for a little over 10 years before it went up to, $121. And I had a roommate that paid all the bills. So it allowed me to not think about, hey, if I'm going to go do this, I need X amount of dollars. I mean, it's different when you get married, have kids, and all that. It's like, ooh, you become, you know, you pivot around the core financial nut, um, and you learn to trust less in God and trust more in your working
Hmm.
like a fever pitch,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I was fortunate. So if someone said, "Hey, come on out," I'd say, "Sure. Where are you?" "I'm in London." "I'll be right there." I had my own band back then, and when you play an 11 o'clock slot at Johnny D's in Cambridge, and people have been there since 8 drinking, and you got 200, and you're trying to sing something that is really important to you. I made a decision back there when I was 23, like, I'm not Bob Dylan. I'm not this, this is not going to be a career of me making money off of my stuff. So, when I got the invitation to go out on a tour, even if it was something I had no experience in, I would fake it until I made it. And one thing led to another. And, I was just fortunate. I don't I don't think it's because I didn't go to Berkeley. I didn't come into this with a record deal with Warner Brothers. But very quickly I thought, well, I'm going to be an artist advocate. And those
Okay.
artists that I'm going to, you know, commit myself to, I'm going to advocate like crazy. It's like when you go to the hospital. If you don't have an advocate there, the
Hmm.
doctor's likely going to make you more sick, and they're only going to push on you what either they've been mandated to push, or it's the drug of the month for the hospital or whatever. And so advocates, artists need advocates. They need to go into the record company and say, you guys are stealing from the artists. You took their rights, et cetera. You're not paying them anything. And I would just enjoy fighting for the arts because the foundation of a record company is not a business guy that came in with money and put money in. It's the artists. You know what makes there used to be record companies like IRS Records,
Mhm.
which had REM and had I think Police, a, a bunch of great artists, their first records. They used to have an energy about it, but then it quickly changed to let's exploit the
Mm.
music, let's exploit the artist. Anyway, so advocate, advocate
Yeah.
for you, advocate for the kids, advocate for somebody. I didn't record my first record personally until I was 60. And
Okay.
I called my son from LA, and he's in Boston. And I said, I'm done with this. I've seen too much. I don't want to be involved
Mm.
anymore. And he said, Dad, well, we have a studio back here, you remember? And why don't you come home? Let's write a bunch of songs and let's play Portland, Maine to New York City. We won't make any money, but we'll have a blast. And I
Hey.
what I heard him the thing that stuck out was like my 24-year-old son would not be embarrassed to get on stage with me. He wants to hang out with me. There's that separation from
Yeah.
your kids that's essential. But and I'm glad to have my son Jesse involved. He's way more talented than me, and so if I suck, I can just point at him. And I give him the song ideas, and I flesh them out for him.
Yeah.
He makes them credible.
I, I, that sounds amazing. I think as a father, I have 4 kids myself, and I've always wanted to do some kind of creative connection with them. I give advice all the time to people. I advocate a lot for people. I want to be able to do it with my own kid, and for you to be able to write an album with your son and then perform it on stage. That had to be probably one of the highlights of your life.
Oh, it continues to be. I've been in a show where he'll play drums. He plays every instrument, but when he's on stage and he's put the band together, the drums give him the best vantage point. So while he's
Yeah.
drumming, he can look around and pick up things and make adjustments. He'll have a console beside him when he's drumming, and that he can turn me off. Your pitch isn't on tonight, Dad. Boom.
Nice.
But yeah, I'll turn around and see him on the drum riser, and I'll lose consciousness, and all of a sudden I'll come back in and see him going. Yeah, I'll have to apologize to the audience and say
Yeah.
this might not be relevant to you, but that's my kid on the drums.
Yeah. Yeah, you get caught in those moments.
Yeah,
Uh, I don't think anybody outside of your family can hit that deeply, but
yeah.
I imagine you've had artists and people that you've advocated for and worked with and served that you count as your extended family.
Hmm.
How has that been watching others that you knew could succeed and you just helped them and they succeed in a great fashion?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you're on a hill in the wintertime with a sled and it's not going anywhere, and it's your kid on the sled, and you give him a little push,
Hmm.
and then he just takes off, and it's like, wow, I remember when I used to be on the sled. Um, I remember all the times I fell off the sled. I remember one time where I hit a tree, uh, uh, but but yeah, I if I just get a moment with somebody and I can help them, I both enjoy it and count it a blessing, but you can't get stuck in the moments. You because the
Yeah,
next moment is right there on its heels. And it's
yeah.
like, okay, what now, God? Otherwise, you'll get a knock on your head, and that knock could be a concussion because you're not listening to direction for what's next. You know, so.
what was your knock? What was your concussion? What was the moment you weren't listening?
Should I answer you literally?
Answer me however you wish.
I have had 14 concussions, and I've had a brainstem stroke, which took my autonomic nervous system and 350 muscles.
Mm.
Um, uh, Before I could even play a guitar again, I had my son and another good friend who's in a band. Um, they put together a physical therapy program for me that was um, twice a day for 30 minutes. Put headphones on because the devil is always there saying, you've done enough. Just watch it. Have you heard of Netflix? Just, and of course, when you've been playing guitar all your life, and all of a sudden you can. I use my right hand to hold the guitar from falling out of my lap, but I can't tell my left hand to grab the neck.
Mm,
It's not talking to me, and so I would do that. I did it for 18 months, where I just try to bounce my hand up and hook the neck, and then I have a little finger that thinks it's a bottleneck slide, so I'll try to create a chord, and all of a sudden I got this little finger. So, well, maybe I need to get an elastic band and put it around here like this.
mm.
God, do you still have anything you want to bring through me musically? If so, I'm back before square one, back when I was 15, and yeah, I
Yeah.
picked up a guitar, and it was all about um, the the popular songs back then, and the motivation was, if you ever want to get a girlfriend, you're either a football star, which I tried, and I got that's where I got 3 concussions, or you're in a band. And so I just spent 18 months, once or twice a day, watching soccer, watching, well, they called it football. Um,
Sure.
and I could not hear myself. And my wife, at the time, we had a art studio here in the house, and she would keep a half an ear on me. And if there ever was a loop, musical loop or something repetitive, she would sneak up on me and record it. I didn't want to
Mm.
hear it. And then, so, it took it again. I'm still way behind, and it's still tough to say I'm going to write a song and I'm going to sit down, pick up a guitar, and then my body's not responding. I couldn't speak. I was all staccato because I couldn't coordinate my breathing and my talking. So if I want
Mm.
to, how are you going to sing something? Where's the inspiration for a melody is muted immediately, and then of course you get frustrated and you put it back, put it down, and you get talked to by a couple people that said, "Stop being a baby," you know. Um, but that was a knock. I remember being it was 16 weeks in a hospital. I remember 2 3 weeks in, um, having a clear choice that I had to make then. You're either going to be bitter, and I had my whole reasons for being bitter, or you're going to be grateful. And it was gratitude that pulled me through. It
Mm.
was thankfulness. I refer to my stroke as a lucky stroke, because it's through the experience of something that's life threatening, and you clearly have a scar. In my case, it was neurological, and I couldn't communicate with parts of my bodies, but and it was April 2020, and COVID was just happening, and the whole bizarre perspective, the panic in the hospital.
But what do you think God has for you now? Where's your service?
Um, well, I retired from the Soul Fest, which I'm still involved. I still help shape it. The two new directors, the two new owners are very dear friends, and they really want to bring Soulfest back to the pre-COVID passion and the whole essence, the whole vibe. And I'm so glad. The stress of Soulfest is not mine anymore. My last year at Soulfest last summer, I had heart failure 3 times, uh,
Mm,
and it was stress induced. And I barely made it back here to Santa Fe to get my graduation ring, which when you get to be a certain age, you hear people get a pacemaker. And that's what I call a graduation ring.
gotcha.
I mean, I was seeing blood pressure of 247 over 140 with 33 beats in,
Whew.
and I'm
Yep.
looking at it like it's surreal and I've got work to do. I can't just. So, anyways, knock on the head. God saying, "Be still. Listen. I'm not done with you yet, but I certainly can't take the next step with you if you're not listening to me." After my stroke, I got signed to Universal Music Group for an international recording deal, and I'm the owner of the label MI5. Uh, had a band called Modern English, and I met him back in the late
Mm,
'80s. And I said, "Dude, I appreciate the distribution worldwide, but there's no bricks and mortar stores. I'm not touring. Uh, how does it make sense?" And he said, "Well, we'll give you a label, so you're in charge of your label, and we'll want to give you an opportunity to get everything out, but it's all new. It's all virtual. It's all digital. You
mm.
know, the way to get an organic inertia momentum is be out there touring, have amazing songs, and you start with
Sure.
30 people, and you work, 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 work. Um, and for me, it's just and I just got a publishing deal a week ago, and that's great. It means I'll have these advocates pitching my songs to Netflix or whatever. And I love this music going out. I don't want to release anything that doesn't resonate with me
Sure.
because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be authentic. And I feel I've got some songs that I guess I don't mean in the ego way, but I'm proud of. I'm not ashamed
Sure.
of. And
Yeah.
so I had a single this summer that was 24 weeks in the top 20 of national rock radio. And so you think of that, you nod your head like, "Oh, that's impressive." But who's listening to radio, even though they gave me reports every Wednesday that you had 1,500 spins, listening audience was 2 million, you're number 10 in New Orleans, you're number 10, you're number 10 in Seattle or San, and I'm thinking like, I guess that's great. Thank you, God, that the song is getting out there. But when it comes to royalties, they're saying you've earned about $50. If it was 25 years ago, we get you a double
Right.
platinum record and 2 million bucks. But it's not the way it is anymore. So
It's a different world. So
yeah,
as we wrap up and the service you've brought to your fellow human beings and to artists, to you've touched so many lives. By touching one life, you've touched a million lives. You've done so much. But today, where you sit, what are you the most grateful for?
it's not profound, but I'm so excited about the weekend coming up. Going for a drive with my wife. I live in Santa Fe, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but 360 degrees of mountains. We
Mm,
had a Mexican gray wolf show up in our yard. We had a mountain lion that was probably 150 pounds. It's the beauty's all around, and I'm looking forward to picking up my guitar this weekend and pushing my stubborn brain through, like, I mean, what if God took one of my arms off? Does that mean it's done? Just literally, I lose an arm, you know,
Right, right.
uh, you know. But my mentor said, God's not done with you. Get all this crazy, complaintive, woe is me crap out of your head. Lean into God and just
Mm.
say, what do you have for me? And it's amazing that experiences cross your path. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't document those experiences. It's just it's
So you're
part,
in the moment, you're in the now.
yeah, it's part of
Yeah.
just submitting yourself to God and saying, "How use me," and I feel fortunate.
But Dan, it does sound like you've had a very fortunate and still have a fortunate life and a great life. And you have served and you have served well. And I just want to say thank you for being on the show today. And thank you truly for your service to your fellow humans. I
Well,
appreciate you.
yeah, it's you're welcome, but it's I'm goofing around most of the time. If you look behind the curtain in one of these productions, you might see me picking my nose. Uh, the essence of that magic happens only because of God, only because what's going on. And I've been really fortunate. And Charles, if give a listen to the new version of Echoes that's on Spotify. Anybody
Okay.
that wants to support an artist, follow them on Spotify. Go to their YouTube page,
Yeah.
and if honestly, if you see a video that resonates with you, leave a comment.
Yep.
But the old Mother Teresa, how do you uh, help the world? And I remember she said one person at a time.
Good time.
So support your independent artists or support the artists of your life.
Hmm.
Follow them on Spotify. Follow them wherever and leave comments.
Yeah.
And that I appreciate.
I've always said on digital media, like, follow, and share because when you can, if you hit share button, it just helps so much.
Yeah.
And you're serving as people are serving you. So again,
Thank
appreciate you, Dan. You've been amazing, and I can't wait to see what's next for you.
yeah. Well, we'll reconnect. Now that we're not strangers, let's keep the
Yes,
relationship going forward.
absolutely.
All right, brother.